All right. So, welcome back to the Badlands podcast. Seated here with Adam Filbin of Clean Dezert, longtime buddy of maybe 2010, 2008-ish on Desert Rangers.
Oh, it goes way back, bud.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, if you've been living under a rock, and I mean, I'm assuming most of the people follow us on Instagram or on the forum or have been listening to this podcast. Clean Dezert is, an organization that we're a big supporter of. And they're obviously a supporter of us on the forum. If you've purchased anything off of the site, we've sent you a Clean Dezert sticker that should be on your truck or toolbox or both. And so, Adam, your efforts to clean up the desert have been pretty epic with your team. Let's just, I guess, dive into how did you get started in the whole cleanup situation?
I kind of fell into the whole cleanup situation, and it really goes back to the big, 1450 MDR days and having a little bit of fun out there. And, if you're involved in that, and I know you were back in the day, the 1450 guys were always considered like the party guys, right? Like,
Yeah.
There was kind of a divide between the older generation, which were all buggy guys, and these kids all of a sudden that were just, flooding the sport with half-built trucks that were pretty janky at the time.
White fender kids.
Yeah, 100%. And so the funny thing was, like, I kind of started to see this, like, it was not necessarily us versus them, and it may have even went back to, like, the beard shootout back in the day, right?
Okay.
But I kind of noticed, like, everyone thought we were a bunch of, like, dumb kids, which we were. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I was. But during that time, too, like, if there's one thing a lot of people know about me is, like, I don't drink. I like to have a lot of fun, but I want to be responsible, too, right? And so that kind of timed in with, the thought of, like, deserts are being shut down. We're going to lose land. What can we do to show that the 1450 kids or, like, these pre-runner kids or whatever we were at the time are responsible just as much as we like to have fun. And so that really spurred into, well, let's do a cleanup. Like, Barstow was trashed. It was hammered.
Oh, I bet.
We called some friends. Jarrett Camberg supplied some money so we could barbecue, brought out a barbecue. And there was like maybe 40, 50 people at most. We didn't tell the BLM. We just showed up on the side of the highway and, like, started cleaning.
Yeah.
And from there, like, it just skyrocketed. I truly, I don't know how and why. I think a lot of it had to do with Desert Rangers back in the day. But a lot of it was just because I didn't want to talk about a problem. I wanted to show, like, we can do something about it.
Sure. Yes. Like, don't talk about it, be about it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, everyone can bitch and moan, but, like, what are you going to do? And my first stab at it was like, let's figure out how to do this. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I can't even tell you right now, like, how I created it, but it was like a bunch of people. We kind of talked about it and everyone's like, yeah, let's do this. It makes sense.
Yeah. And so was it like the first cleanup that you did, was it just like hauled the stuff home with your truck, or did you guys get a dumpster and everything too?
Truly, I don't even remember. We had to have had a dumpster. I know we were right off the 247, right outside the city limits. If you know where the Power Line Road is, I know you and I go run for trash down there all the time. We stopped there, and I'm pretty sure we had like one or two dumpsters out there. My memory is not that great, but I vividly remember the BLM showing up mid cleanup. And everyone went like, crap, the cops. Like, what are we going to do, right? And everyone's looking at me. And so I went and talked to the guy. I was like, hey, like, we're doing this. He's like, oh, that's amazing. Let us know if you ever need help in the future.
Rad.
And so, like, from there, it was like, oh, I guess, like, people like this thing, right? And, like, let's just keep doing it.
Yeah. Wow. And so you do the first cleanup, and I don't even remember. I was like, I don't know if I was even on DR at that point. I think I came on like 07. So did you like post up about it? Like, hey, we did this. And this is obviously pre-social media. I mean, maybe Facebook's like a little bit.
Was it
MySpace?
I was gonna say MySpace back then. Oh man, it really makes me feel old. But
you are, bud.
Yeah. Most of it was Desert Rangers, right? Like the great thing about 1450 racing back in that day, and I think anybody that participated in it would agree that like the camaraderie was amazing, like more so than you see almost anywhere else, right? And so a lot of, my success through Clean Desert, I think, was with Desert Rangers because, I was early in to Desert Rangers when they first started that site. Spent a lot of time, thank you work for paying me to basically screw around on message boards all day. But I was a heavy user on there. And so it was, we made all these friends and contacts through the industry doing that. And so I think it was easy to say like, hey guys, we need to get behind this. And there was, I don't want to say like heavy hitters in the 1450, but Camberg was on board because a lot of my friends work there and they were, interested in this type of thing. And a lot of the people on DR that were like the moderators and people running it, Jeremy and all those guys, and Scott from Camberg, everybody knows. And all those people, like, they were like, yeah, like this makes sense. Let's do it. Right. And so you have this following that like you have all these big guys that want to be involved. And then everyone else kind of follows suits and sees how neat it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think back, I don't even know if I've talked to you about this, but before when I first got into the off-road scene, I think it was like '06, I think it was 2006 or 2007, there was the Calico cleanup.
Okay.
And so this, like, kind of interesting, we were talking about it before the podcast started. It's like, we were kind of operating in the same space. Like, you're desert racing in 1450 and I was part of the GFO race team. And then you start this whole cleanup thing. And I had, been involved with the Rover crew and I went out to a cleanup there. And so it's just interesting to see how it, like, the road kind of connected with Clean Desert and, myself through Desert Rangers back in, I think it was '08 or '09 was the first one that I went to, which at that point, I mean, I remember it being 400 people probably.
Yeah. So, it's interesting you mentioned that. During when we started this, like, there wasn't social media. So how do you find other cleanups? Like, I really had no idea. And I wasn't in the realm of, like, I think historically cleanups have been very much in, somebody could argue with me about this and I don't really know, but it seems like a lot of it is around like the Jeep clubs, right? 4x4 clubs.
Correct.
And there was no market towards the pre-runner guys, right? And so it was interesting because like people were like, oh, did you do this claim? Did you do this one? I was like, I have never even heard of them. I didn't know anybody else was doing them. But I think like part of the claim to our fame was like when I started doing these, again, being a broke kid trying to race my truck in, how we got to 2008, 2009 with these big cleanups was pretty much two things. One, we kind of guaranteed there was going to be a party out there, right? And I'm sure you were involved in them. Like the after the event was wild.
Yeah.
I've seen Mikey on your podcast many a times. Like that's where I met him. I remember him burning his hand after the event and going, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? But then hanging out with him all night and having a ton of fun. Right. But we really drove. My goal for Clean Desert in the beginning was like, how do we drive people out there? And it was all these broke kids that couldn't afford to build their truck. So it's like, if I can get companies to supply parts that we could raffle off, then the kid that wants to race his truck but needs a set of bump stops or needs a set of beams or whatever it was, they could win them for free. They just have to put in a little work. And so that, I think, really between, that and Desert Rangers drove our numbers is, it's cool to win stuff. And then once you start doing it, you're like, well, 4 hours of cleaning, it's actually fun. People have a good time doing it.
100%.
And so then it's like, oh, I'm having fun, but then I could win great parts. It's like, oh, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to go to that event.
Did you know that the bump stops off of on the mouse are from the cleanup?
Are they really?
In like 2009, I think I won those.
I had no idea. And so like for me, the best part of the event is hearing those types of stories. Like this last weekend, Brandon Miller, right? I saw he mounted a bump stop rack in the back of his truck and he's like, I need bump stops. And he wanted a set of bump stops.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's like, that's the exact thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we're all saving our money no matter who you are, no matter how, how great a truck people think you have. Like, we're all saving up for something. And so if you can win it doing that, like, that's killer. But then for me, it really solidifies what we're doing. Kind of a neat story that happened a couple years ago was, again, this lady I don't know, but now, I chat with her every once in a while. Her name's, I think, Tiffany. she won the Camberg housing, right? And so she came up to me crying because she won this housing, and she had told me that, she went to her brother's memorial, prayed that morning, wanted this housing, and she was the most organized I've ever seen anybody at our cleanup, right? With raffle tickets, she had a binder, all of her numbers down, and she won a ton of stuff, but didn't win the housing. And the guy next to her won the housing and was like, "Hey, I'll trade you everything that you won for this housing."
Whoa.
And so like she came up just Godsmack, like, "Oh my gosh," right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And now like we chat all the time, and like every time there's a cleanup, she's like, "Oh, I need to be there. Like I need to be there," right? And it's because of those types of situations that it's really neat that we get to help people out, not only cleaning the desert, but helping people with parts that are
Yeah.
expensive and they want to win. Like it really makes, everything that we do come full circle and feel pretty good about it.
Totally. I mean, for me, obviously winning those bumps back in 2009 was awesome. But I mean, I think just for being a part of the cleanup, in any capacity, whether we're, helping with the cooking or physically picking up the trash, I think that just going out there and seeing, it being a total shit show of trash, and then it's all cleaned up, that's the reward for me. And everybody's in it for different reasons, but
Certainly.
the cleanup raffle is definitely pretty epic. So
I mean,
if you need a reason to go just for that, I mean, it's worth it.
I feel truly like in my heart that draws the crowd initially, but then you talk to everybody that's out there, and they have, whether the raffle's there or not, like raffle's the icing on the cake, but like you talked to Jared at Oceana Dunes, right? Like I sent them on kind of a scavenger hunt this last event down to Apple Valley, and all he said was, I need cars, right? And I was like, "Hey, like we'll get you some extra tickets to incentivize you to go farther than everybody else." And he goes, "I don't care about that. I just want some cars,"
Yeah.
right? And how many times have we heard over the years, it's like, who brought the craziest thing back or the biggest thing? And like, it really becomes just a desert scavenger hunt of like, where you can find the biggest amount of trash and bring
Absolutely.
it back. And then again, like, the food that you guys cook is epic and like all that's great. But like, once we get them hooked with, "Hey, like you guys should come out," then everyone's having a good time. And I think
Yeah.
that's what drives our numbers.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But so just to kind of run through it. So 2009, 2010, that I think 2010, I had the white Rover out there and I got a car. I think it was a Mustang. I have photos I'll post up, but I drug it to the front of Hodge, like all the way to the access road, and then a Unimog, this like massive green Unimog.
Alan Draper.
Yeah,
The guy is awesome. Yeah.
He drug it back and then like parked on top of it. I was like,
I remember seeing those pictures, and like that year, that was probably a little bit of heartache for me. I'm like, "Oh, what am I going to do with this?" But we figured it out. It's not the end of the world, like
Yeah.
we always do. But again, like, how much fun is that to say you dragged a car back and
it was
you found
epic.
a car?
Yeah. I mean, that was, not quite 20 years ago, but I'm still talking about it.
And that makes you the king of the event that year, right? And that's
Yeah.
what everyone wants to be, is like, I found the coolest thing.
Yeah,
Like, this is killer.
Totally. But so then, so 2010, and then there was kind of a bit of a gap. You had what?
Yeah, so we took like a 9-year hiatus. It's a little bit of a heavy conversation, but everyone in the sport, right? And especially if you're heavy into racing back then, it all kind of revolved around the night race, right? And so, our big things were the cleanups, but we were all racing the night race. And if you weren't around for that racing back then, you'd have somewhere between 50 and 70 1450 trucks, right? From the best of the best, probably Dan Vance back then, householder, to just guys just piecing together trucks. And it didn't matter. We were all having fun. And so we were all racing that. And obviously 2010, there was a huge accident. And we were there for it. We didn't race that year. We were standing way too close, just like everybody else. But a lot of, I haven't talked to a lot of people about this, but in 2008 and 2009, under Clean Dezert and the 1450 crew or crowd, we put up snow fencing the 2 years prior for that event because, we talked to MDR and like there was a safety issue. We weren't comfortable racing that close going through the crowd. And so we had funded snow fencing and rebar and stuff from the 1450 racers. We took a pot or at least I did with some of my friends. And then we asked, guys to come out and help. And so really the 1450 racers in Clean Desert set up snow fencing to protect people. 2009, 2010, I was on vacation, wasn't supposed to be there. My buddy Hoseby called me and was like, hey, I'm going to pick up your truck. I'll have it at my house. Just shoot out as soon as you get back from vacation. We can make it like an hour before or half hour before the race starts. And so I was like, yeah, I can't miss the race. I've gone to it like every year since 2002, even before the rock pile was big. Like I have pictures of some of the people from DR at the rock pile, and there's 15 people there.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
by 2010, there's thousands. And so we weren't supposed to be there. The accident happened, which, PTSD for sure, just seeing all that. But then I ended up getting disposed for litigation, right? Because they wanted to know who put up snow fencing, why we did snow fencing, why it wasn't there in 2010. And all that really kind of took the wind out of my sails from off-road for a little bit. I was really worried about if we put on an event and I lost my house, right? Because somebody got hurt. I stopped kind of going to all the big events. And even to this day, like if you go to the desert with me and most of my friends, like other than the cleanups, they're small. Like, I want to be around like 10 people. I don't want to be around hundreds and hundreds of people. And so that really made it difficult to want to put myself out there and do these cleanups.
Sure.
And I think, the whole architecture of off-road racing changed that day, right? Like, the races that came after that, there was, a lot more safety, which there should have been already. But a lot of people weren't going anymore, right? There was no big race. And I think that's, not what killed 1450, but it definitely made it hard to get back into it. So yeah, we took a pretty big gap there.
Sure. No, and I mean, I on the first podcast that we did, Wally and I, that accident was the very reason that I got into doing the point-to-point trips and not racing anymore. It was just that just kind of tainted it, I guess, for me.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, it just lost all of its fun, right?
Sure.
And it's funny because you guys talked about the point-to-point stuff, and I was watching what you guys were doing there and going, man, I need to do that. Like, that's so much more fun. And I think maybe it's like the evolution of all of us getting older maybe as well. I don't know 100%, but I do enjoy that type of stuff versus spinning laps in the same areas that I've done for years and years and years.
No, absolutely. But okay, so you had, 9 years you weren't off-roading at all? You just were you still had the race truck at that point, or did you sell it in that window?
In that window, somewhere in there, I sold it. I don't remember what year. But, from 2010, I bought my first house. And so that was, a big thing. Like I was spending a lot of time fixing up this dump that I bought, basically. Starting a family, right? Like somewhere in there, I got married. We had a kid. And so like I was still going to the desert, but it was really more of like just relaxing stuff. Like I didn't spend a whole lot of time in Barstow. If we were doing stuff, it was either down in Ocotillo because I moved farther south, so Ocotillo was close. We were doing stuff out there, going to Johnson Valley and Lucerne, and just kind of relaxing with friends more than really worrying about racing. And I think during that whole thing too, at least my transition was hard. Up until 2010, I was in Orange County with all my friends, right? And so if we were prepping a truck or prepping my truck, or at the time it would have been my roommate Kevin's truck, like we had groups of people to work on stuff, or at least a couple of us.
Sure.
Right? Fast forward 2010, I moved to San Diego. Like nobody's helping me prep my truck. And so I did actually race my Ranger, I think in 2013, maybe at Battle of Prim, or 2012. Somehow somebody talked me into like bringing the truck back out and racing it. But it's like, oh, cool. I get to prep the entire thing by myself in the garage. Like, that takes the fun out of it.
Sure.
And so like, then it just becomes like, it's more hassle than it is fun at this point. And so that's why like probably a lot of the racing kind of cut back as well.
Sure. Yeah. That's interesting. And so, fast forward 2019, you decide you get a wild hair to fire this thing back up?
Yeah, I kind of did. I think work was going really well for me at that time. And so I kind of had, you know, I life was going great at that point, right? I had already started my family. I had a daughter. Transition. I got rid of the race truck. I got another really nice truck. Got rid of that. I think now I have my Fraptor. But I was kind of like taking account of everything that I had, and it's like, I'm doing really well at work, but working for somebody else. And so like I wanted something that I could tie my name to. And I went through some health issues in 2017. And so coming out of that, my mindset has really been quite a bit different than it was. Like prior to that, it was work hard, grow, do all this stuff. And it got me to a certain point. And then, having these issues and coming out of it, it's like, well, what's my legacy? Like, what am I going to do? And like, for my daughter, like, am I just going to be somebody that worked, or am I going to have like maybe a name and something? And I remember seeing like Off-Road Hall of Fame, which is funny because I'm wearing the hat right now, right? But like, I remember seeing an ad, and like, people have legacies in off-road. Like, I raced, and let's be honest, I wasn't very good. Like, I spun circles around the race course, but never was winning anything, never one of the big guys. But it's like, off-road has been in my life since, late 90s, and racing and building trucks, and met every single one of my friends through it. And it's like, how do I do something bigger than just what I was doing? And so, it kind of clicked. It's like, maybe I should bring Clean Dezert back. Like, what would that look like, 9 years later? Is it even feasible? And so I started to kind of put out feelers of like, hey, like, what's everybody think, right? Because like by then, I think Desert Rangers was pretty much dead. There was social media, which allowed us to do more things. But I was like, oh man, I don't know if like anybody is even going to remember or follow me.
Yeah.
And so we started kind of I started dipping my toe in it. Like, hey, I want to do something. I really enjoyed, this positive image of what we were doing. I really enjoyed making and meeting new people, and like all these friends that came with it. And so it's like, well, let's see what we can do. So I called some friends up and like, hey, would you guys be interested in helping? Kind of a little bit of a new subset of friends now, because, people married and moved out of state and that type of stuff. But the neat thing was, as soon as like I started kind of going down that road, like everyone was on board. Like it was like, we never skipped a beat. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, I think this is feasible. Like, all I have to do is what I did before, and let's see what can happen. And,
Sure.
I think 2019, when we came back, we had, I think the sign-up sheets were like 700, the biggest event we've ever had. And it was like, oh my God, like this is possible to keep doing. And so it was pretty neat for us to be able to do that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I remember you I think it was on DR that you're like, hey, we're going to start it back up. I'm like, when? Let me know.
Yeah, everyone was so supportive, which is cool, because like I kind of just figured like, it's been by the wayside. It's too long. Like we'd get maybe like 50 people out there, and it was the complete opposite. I think everyone, missed kind of what we had done in the past, and there was, again, no other events. I think one of the cool things that we do too is like, it's kind of the beginning of the season. So like I hear a lot of people like, oh, I got to prep my truck and get it ready for the event. And, with help of all these groups of people that want to be involved in it, like it just skyrocketed and took off, and it was great,
Yeah.
Pre-COVID and all that stuff, like it was going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and the events, was it 2019 that you did, was that the Hodge cleanup also, or was that 2020?
Oh, they all mixed together.
Yeah.
So the first one, 2019, would have been Barstow, because that's the biggest one we come back to. I think 2020, we were like, well, hey, like Barstow did so good, like maybe we should kind of spread our wings a little bit and spend a little bit more time other areas. And anybody that knows Hodge, like it's the worst of the worst. And so I thought too, it'd be neat that like, the hard thing that people don't realize is it takes us, anywhere from 4 to 5 months from day one of planning to the event. And the hard thing is desert season's 5-6 months at most, right? So we start in summer and we do our November one, but then we have to follow right back up, and if we're going to do one in the spring. But then it leaves this whole gap in summer, and it's like nobody's doing anything. And so then the thought was like, well, maybe we could do something at night and go out to the shooting area, which isn't safe to be at during the day anyways, and clean up that area. And so that kind of spurred on Hodge, which was, a new undertaking for us. And it did well, probably not as good as Barstow, but we were kind of targeting a new demographic of people too, which is shooting trash, right?
Sure.
It's not the off-road stuff.
Yeah. But it's freaking rampant everywhere.
It's so bad. And I still have a hard time with that group because, I would say off-road was easy, right? Because I'm in the depths of off-road, right? I don't know everybody, but I know a good group of people. But when we tried to do the shooting groups, like I tried to go on these forums and say, hey guys, like, look, there's an issue. And the response typically was, and it was completely different than off-road, but the response was, well, I either pick up my stuff or I don't shoot there. I only shoot here. And so it's not my responsibility. And it's the same message as off-road. Like, the 400 or 500 people that come to our events, they're not the ones littering, but it's our responsibility because if it gets shut down,
Sure.
it's because they're going to look at us for saying, hey, you guys, threw all this trash away. And so for the shooting clubs, I was trying to go after them, and maybe I just didn't find the right group to get into. And we did have some help. It's not to say that we didn't, but I was hoping that we would get more of them. But it was really off-roaders picking up after the shooting people, and the shooting people just saying, well, it's not my responsibility.
Sure.
It's somebody else.
Which is total garbage as far as that mindset, because like you just said, it's not any of, I would say we just did the cleanup, last 2 weekends ago? Last weekend. Yeah. So I would say of the 10, 12 dumpsters that were filled up, I would say less than one dumpster was off-roader trash. And off-roader trash would be what? Easy up, a tire, like a mud terrain or all-terrain tire.
A couple camping chairs.
What we're picking up out there is, refrigerators, washer, dryer, just household mattresses.
Yeah.
Semi-truck tires. And it's to have the mindset of, oh, well, that's not mine, so I'm not going to deal with it. That's the exact mindset that's going to get everything shut down.
Exactly. And I think that's why, off-road and like everyone listening, everyone on Bad Lines, like, right? That's why we've all become such great friends, is because we all have this killer mindset of like, off-road is family, right? Like you don't leave anybody behind. You help everyone. While we might poke fun at people, because
100%.
it's fun, right?
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like off-road's a giant family. Like it's very rare that you meet anybody that's not in it for the right reasons, right? Like, and I think I had heard somewhere that somebody had basically said that like, we're going out to these harsh environments, beating up our vehicles, and like we could be stranded. And so we all know like kind of the dangers of what we do. And so it's important to help everyone. And really at the end of the day, it feels great to help people, whether it's building their trucks or giving them advice, whatever it is. But off-road is family. And I wasn't finding that around kind of the shooting community. And
Sure.
again, I was just scratching the surface of what it is, but we did a couple years out at Hodge, and then between it being like 120 degrees during the day and for me, I have to be out there while the dumpsters are there. So they get dropped off Friday, they get picked up Monday. I'm camping all weekend. My AC in my trailer doesn't keep up. I'm like sweltering. I was like, maybe we're going to tone down on Hodge a little bit, just because, and truthfully, the saddest thing to it all was after everyone leaves, right? We do this huge event Saturday night. We fill like 3 dumpsters. We have heavy machinery out there, lights, all this stuff. We clear a patch, and it's maybe only a quarter of the shooting area, right? But like make a huge dent. I wake up Sunday morning and people are shooting and already leaving stuff. And like, I just threw up my arms the last time we did. I was like, you know what? This isn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
Like like it's a losing battle. And I feel bad saying that. But I think that's something that, the shooting community needs to look at a little bit harder, because like you hear about those types of areas getting closed down and then they all bitch and moan. And it's like, you guys have opportunities to do stuff, but you're not willing to get out of your own way.
Totally. And then it's like, okay, so the shooting thing is, I get it. You bring out your old propane tank, you blow it up, you leave it. like that. I don't want to say it makes sense to leave it, but it's like I understand that you're bringing an item to use as a target. Now, the folks that are bringing their, whether it's a cleanup crew that got paid to take the trash away and then they just go haul it in the dump, out and dump it in the desert, or somebody that's got a couch that they don't want to pay to dump it at the dump. How do we, as with whatever social media reach, whatever, we're doing here, and, for our listeners, how can we help educate these people to not do that? Like,
I mean, I think, I get asked a lot, like, all these people that throw away or like leave trash, dump trash, do whatever, they're bad people. And I look at it as education, right? I'm going to go back to shooting just for a second here, but like, I own firearms. I've been shooting a lot. It never really clicked in my mind of like, we'd leave shells. We typically pick up all of our big items, but now we're leaving shells, which is trash, right? And so after doing more of this, it's like, we should all be shooting on tarps, right? Pick up the corners, dump it in a 5-gallon bucket. You just cleaned up all your shells. There's no trace, right? And I think little things like that of like, it will start to click to people, right? And so I look at it as, not everyone's bad. Are they doing the wrong thing? Yes, but like maybe they just need that education. And so I look at, like that. Take a tarp, shoot on the tarp, shoot on a blanket, whatever helps, right, to police your brass, and then you can take your stuff away. And so same thing with the cleanups is you're never going to win going to somebody and saying, hey, you have to clean up, right? Like it's too harsh of a word, or it's too harsh of a message, and people are going to be defensive as soon as you say it. And so I look at it as Clean Desert, like I want it to really be more natural. And the hope of it all is that we target the younger generation right now. Like, we've done such a great job with the pre-runner crowd, which I'd say is really like 20 to 35. Even though some of us are outside that demographic, but my goal is to target, my idea is to target those people. And if they're running our stickers, our shirts, anything that shows, or even the fact that they go out and clean, if they see somebody throwing a beer bottle or a beer can on the ground at a camp, right, which is like an honest mistake some people just haven't learned, that maybe that person will say, hey, we just cleaned up last weekend. I'd appreciate if you pick that up. And so my whole goal is if we can make Clean Desert kind of more of a brand, right, and get it out in front of people, then maybe they'll think. And again, I don't think it's 100%. We're not picking up 100% of just trash like cans and stuff, but I do think that will help. And so it's again, you can't go yell at people, but it's more of just branding in front of people, I think.
Totally. And I mean, I think it's easier to kind of target our demographic of, with us on the bad line side. It's like, we've done the King of the Canners thing and trying to target, I guess, trying to make like cleaning up cool.
Is 100%.
Essentially kind of what you're trying to do as well. And, that's, with the trash bags, with the sackets or, whatever the trash bag is. And it's like, if you've got a Clean Desert sacket or a gunny sack or a bad lines trash, it doesn't matter. Just take something with you and pick up. If you see a can, pick it up. And then hopefully the person that, obviously you don't want to go up to somebody and rub them the wrong way and, get into a altercation with somebody because they threw their can. But like you said, maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't know that, hey, throwing your cans in the fire is not really a good practice.
Well, I think, so two things that kind of spurred a thought to me. One, like looking at 2006 to 2010, there wasn't kind of the green movement that we're seeing today, right? So when we came back in 2019 and we're now starting up, then I'm looking around seeing, oh, there's like a bunch of people that want to be involved, right? And like that this whole like our environment thing as a nation is really like bigger now than it ever was. So I think that helps with attraction. But to your point, when we went out to King and the Hammers a couple years ago, we had trash bags and we were picking up, it was either at night or in the morning, just kind of helping, right? And I remember a guy walking up to me, is like, "Oh, you have a trash bag? Can I have one? I'd like to help." Right. And I think little things like that is, if you have thousands of people out somewhere and nobody's cleaning, then nobody's thinking about it. But if you have 1,000 people and you have 10 people that are kind of walking around talking to some people, and then you won't get all 1,000 people to help, but you may get another 10 or 20 people, which is more than you had.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, even with Clean Desert, it's not one person doing it, it's 400, which makes an impact. Right. And so that's the biggest thing, is like, again, how do you make it cool? I think is, trying to get our message, and you guys do a great job helping us, and even with the King of the Canner stuff, promoting all that, is just getting it out in front of more people. I think that alone is going to create just this change in our sport and the dynamic of everything that we do.
Totally. And so for somebody listening to this that, maybe isn't nearby Southern California, that can come to the cleanups that you're putting on, what is your thought for how would somebody go about starting their own cleanup? Maybe that's, even if it's just organizing a bunch of buddies and going and, fitting whatever you can fit in your truck beds or your SUVs, or, organizing an actual dumpster. Like, what would be your advice there?
I think, I get asked, I get asked often. People will hit me up and I'll give them everything. Like, my goal is to give as much information on what we do so more people can do it, because it's not a business that I'm profiting on. It's a nonprofit. And really it's to create more of this thought, right? I would say the number one thing is picking a date and sticking to it. Because if you have a deadline, you're going to do something. And it doesn't have to be everyone kind of, I think people see Clean Desert and it's like the glamour of like all these people, all these raffles. Again, our first one, it was, a Weber charcoal grill and like 30, 40 people. It wasn't big by any means. We didn't have raffles. We didn't do anything. It was just a group of friends doing something positive. And so I think for anybody wanting to start is, don't worry about the glamour of it all. Just create the impact, because you and your 5 friends, you and your 10 friends is already better than nothing. And so start with that, is like, grab a bunch of friends. I think the other thing too is like, you have to have fun. And so what created our growth in the beginning was, we talk about all the raffle prizes that draws people. I mean, we had live bands at the end of the day, right? I don't know if you remember some of those, but they were playing on trailers.
I don't know. I don't remember that. Maybe that was the first year or something.
We always had a hard time getting bands out there.
Yeah.
But one of the guys from Off-Road, he was in a band, Off-Road Magazine. He's in a band, and we conned him to come play. And he sat on top of our trailer and played, right? And so like, it was awesome. So I always look at it as like, it can't be 100% work. It has to be fun. And so I think for a lot of people, like, if you're looking to do something, do just a quick trail run somewhere. And as you're doing it, pick up trash and promote it. And I think that alone, everyone wants to go use their trucks or their vehicles. And I think if you're just using it as an excuse, hey, we're going to go run this trail, but while we do it, we're going to pick up trash and just fill our beds.
Yeah.
You don't need to bring back couches and beds. But if you bring back, like you said, a sacket full of trash, then we're already better. And so start with that and use that as, the first event. And then the next event, sprinkle on a little bit more, whether it's now you can promote and say, hey, we've done this. We brought out 10, 15, 20 people. We need one sponsor to maybe donate something for a raffle.
And companies, I mean, I can't speak for every company, but most companies, if they see that you're doing something, they're going to want to jump on board. Like
Absolutely. And so that's the easy. I mean, it's not the easiest thing. It's a numbers game, right? So for every sponsor we get, we have to call 2 or 3 sponsors, right? And as we get bigger, we have different sponsors that come in. But that's the thing, is don't get discouraged. There are people that want to help, and especially whatever region you're in, you can get, the local restaurant. Like, nobody wants to see their deserts trash. And so look at local companies. They're always willing to help out, no matter how big or how small you are. And so you can put that into whether it's dumping fees or just some cheap, small raffle prizes, and that will help you grow. And like you said, we even did this for many years before we became a full-fledged nonprofit. People were willing to help, and it's more so you have to be willing to put yourself out there and ask and show that, hey, we're doing this for the community.
Sure.
And if you're willing to do something good, there's a lot of people willing to support you at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, it's totally. And then, I mean, as far as obviously identifying an area that's in need, I mean, that's obviously pretty self-explanatory. So figure out where you need to clean up, figure out the date, and then, marketing, as far as, that's, I don't want to say it's easy, but easier than it was when you started. As far as you have social media, you have organizations like Corva, Tread Lightly, Clean Dezert, us, Bad Lines. We're all willing to help you market that.
And it's all where you want to go, right? And Jesse and Melissa did one in, was it like New Mexico?
Yeah, Adventure Endeavor.
Yeah, that to me was the coolest thing, right? And they kind of hit me up and asked some questions, and like it made an impact where they were, right?
Yeah, they did a dumpster or a dumpster or two.
Yeah. All in a place that they don't even live, right? Because they travel on the road all the time, but they found an area in need. They got some local people to get involved and some local, off-roading people and stuff. And they people come from all walks of life to go help because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so that's all you need to really do is pick an area, pick a date, figure out, you may not need a dumpster your first time, but figure out like how you're going to dispose of it, and then do what you can do. And if it's on, public lands, talk to the BLM. Like, I don't know if you talked to the BLM this time.
No, I didn't even see him. I was hiding from the wind.
Yeah, you and me both. While we were out there, it's interesting. This is the first time I've heard the BLM really talk about the struggles they have out in Barstow, right? It's a new manager out in Barstow. They said they're 46% staffed. And so they're completely understaffed. And so for what we're doing for them is a huge help, right? And so they want to get involved. Sometimes they don't know how to get involved, but we're making their job easier typically by doing all this stuff. And so they want to help. And so like, don't be afraid to reach out to those people and say, hey, we want to do this. We want to help you out. And I think a lot of it is the messaging, whether it's the companies, whether it's the BLM, is sometimes it's not about what we're doing, but it's how you make other people's job easier, right? So BLM, hey, we're going to do all this. We're going to pick it up. I don't necessarily need you there. I'm not asking for anything other than your permission. They're going to say yes almost all day long. Even with companies, it's, you can't always go in with, hey, I need, but ask the simple question, if these deserts close down, what does that do to your off-road business?
Yeah.
Right? Off-road expo, same thing. Like, what happens to the off-road expo if there's no off-roading? A lot of jobs are lost, right? And so I think part of it is you can kind of leverage what our main goal is I want to keep our deserts open, our public lands open, and leverage that to the companies that you're reaching out to as far as, pull on their heartstrings a little bit of like, what motivates them.
And even if you're not getting, you're reaching out to these companies, obviously product is, if your goal would be to get them on board as a quote unquote sponsor, for, them to either donate money, them to donate product. Well, let's say, right now, at this recording in November of 2024, it's a little bit rough out there for across the board. People 100%. Are holding on to their money, but an idea that I just kind of thought of is maybe they don't give you a product or funds, but maybe they help you market your event on social media, whether that be they post it up on the story or they post it up on their Facebook or whatever. That could be, equally as valuable.
100%. So all of our sponsors are not monetary or product driven, right? Like you guys, it's just time donated, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of help that is for us is tremendous. And truly it is. Having you guys on board, and the amount of stress that relieves from us. And obviously, and I've told you, it elevates our event tremendously. Because if you know anything about our events from 2006, 2010, 2019, like hamburgers and hot dogs, the cheapest stuff, because like, and Elliott will attest to this, like when you got to buy food for 500
Yeah,
people,
it's expensive.
it's expensive. And then to cook it all. Yeah, I don't know if you remember it, before 2010, but Kevin Lawrence, who was my roommate, one of my close friends, he loves to cook, right? And so we put him on the barbecue. That dude was cooking 500 hamburgers and hot dogs for everyone. And he ended that day with blisters from the heat.
Oh man. Yeah, on a gas grill. Yeah.
Coming off yeah. And like, and the guy's an animal, like the greatest guy ever, but he spent all day out there just flipping burgers and hot dogs and cooking these things, and they're flaming up all over the place. And just the point is, like, that takes so much effort. And even like I was talking to your wife about getting the buns. Did you ever think about how hard it is to find buns sometimes? I know you guys had an issue.
Yeah.
But then to stack 500 buns, those things are a slip and slide as soon as you get 2 or 3 tall, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so it's I've had them fill my entire trailer, the entire bed of my truck, and it's like just room. You never think about this when you got to do it.
Yeah.
But it's so much work that goes into just cooking. And so for you guys to take that on and help is major.
With and I think it was the 2019 cleanup that I saw Kevin and Hoseby, you guys crushed it though. I mean,
we made it work.
Yeah, but I also like to cook, and I was like, I saw, hey, how can I help you guys basically? And this was before Bad Lines, I think.
You were just getting tired of the burnt hot dogs and you wanted tacos.
So we were, I hit you up. I was like, hey, how about we cook? And you were a little reluctant, but you're like, all right. You're hitting me up. You're like, hey bro, you good?
To be fair, because in what I've done, and maybe it's that I'm not great at managing, every year I have somebody that says they want a part of the group. And so they talk about doing all this stuff. And then when it comes down to brass tacks, they're nowhere to be found. Right? And this has happened, every year from 2006 to 2010, 2019, 2020. Like there's always people that want to help, but then you really got to find, and again, maybe it's my mismanagement, but I find that I have to hound them to get them to actually participate in what they've signed up for.
Sure.
So the first year, you're right, with you, I was like, hey, like, if we don't feed these people, are we going to have a mutiny? Right?
Yeah.
That was my fear. And like, if you know anything about me, I'm very controlling because, management at the time, 2019, that's what I was doing. I was managing 50 employees at our company. And so like my name is associated with everything.
Sure.
I had to be very hands-on. After you guys did it in 2020, I was like, well, this is killer.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask them.
We pulled it off.
Make sure that you knew the date going forward. But yeah, you guys kill it every single time. And you're cooking food that's way better than what we were cooking. So that's what I'm saying is it elevates our event and doesn't make it, great. It's a Clean Desert event, but I want it Clean Desert and Bad Lines. I want everyone's event, right? Like I want it. And that's why we're trying to do more vendors. Like, not that I want to be this huge thing. I just want more people to partake and have fun.
Totally. It's been fun. I mean, obviously we couldn't pull it off without our crew. I mean, we've had just unreal people. I mean, it's basically I figure out the food order, and now it's even the last few years Caleb, shout out to Caleb.
The guy is an animal, bud.
He's works for UC Davis in the meat science, the meat lab. Shout out to the UC Davis meat lab. But so they have been making brats, and so he has all his students prep the brats and the peppers and all that, and it basically has made things way easier. The tacos were great. But it's obviously a hell of a lot more work to make the rice. And I think if we continued on, I don't even eat rice, so I don't know if the rice was good, but everyone was going to murder me because the first year we did rice in 2020, I got a 50-pound bag and we made like a good amount of it, and we had a bunch of extra. And they're like, dude, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I've never.
You have no idea, right? And that's my biggest fear is like when we buy food, when we were doing it, it's like, okay, we're planning on like 500 people, whatever it is. I don't want people to go without. So like I was buying so much food.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the good thing is we were donating it to food banks and stuff
Sure.
afterwards. But like, yeah, like we had a couple hundred hamburgers still frozen.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had packs of hot dogs. I remember one year, like, dude, we had so many hot dogs left over. Like, we had coolers full,
Sure.
but you don't know. And like, I don't want people to go without. And
Yeah.
so it's, again, it's hard to judge like
Totally.
how much food do you need, and especially when you're serving like really good food like you are now. Like how many broths are people going to eat?
Yeah, and
I have no idea.
I mean, and like you said, you don't want to run out. But so I think that the way that you've got the cleanup set up with obviously the trash, the the lunch that you do, and the raffle, unreal. But I think that for again back to somebody, if they wanted to do a cleanup, I think if you got a dumpster and 10 guys, even if it took you all day to fill up that dumpster, or whatever, a couple hours to fill up the bed of your trucks, that is still going to make an impact, and it's totally worth doing.
Absolutely. The one thing that I want to be very clear about too is it's not about filling it completely. For a lot of years, I was like, I have to fill every dumpster. It's not about that. It's just about putting trash in the dumpster, right? If it's half full, a quarter full, you still did more than everyone else, and you should be proud of that.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that's the biggest thing is like, don't judge on what other people are doing. We've had cleanups that 10 people showed up to, and I wouldn't say that, I mean, they did their purpose, but like for me, I like doing big ones because that's kind of what we're known for. But no matter what you do, you're doing more than the million other people in the country that are doing nothing right
Correct.
now, right?
Correct.
And so I think that's a huge thing.
Absolutely. And I just think I don't remember if it was a guy that was doing cleanups up in Oregon, and I think we talked about this at the cleanup a little bit, but it's based off of the amount of people you can have. Let's say 300 people or 600 people, you're going to get the same amount of work done. And so it's, don't be turned off where, my cleanup only has X amount of people, it's not worth doing. Wrong. Do it.
And one of the things I look at as well is like, I'm sure you know Colin from Desert Cleanse. The guy's a one-man show.
Yeah. Savage.
And, like, he picks up a ton of trash, and like the impact that he's doing for his community is huge because as far as I know, and again, I don't follow everyone in the world, but like he's the only one out there doing that. And the impact that he makes is massive. And I think that, just shows that whether it's one person or 400 people, like anybody can do it. And I'll be honest, like I'm old, like I couldn't keep up with Colin on a daily basis, right? Like I have to be at work. I have my kids. I have all this stuff, and I don't live anywhere near kind of where the deserts are, right? But the amount of trash that he does as one single person is probably close in a year to what Clean Desert's doing, right?
Yeah.
And two different aspects, two different realms of what's happening. But it just goes to show, like, you just have to have the want to do it, and then anything can happen.
Totally. So with Clean Desert, obviously just had the cleanup last week. That was 12 dumpsters?
So we did 11 dumpsters. There was 9 trash, 1 metal recycling, and 1 tire dumpster. And then Apple Valley, we kind of did something new this year because we had this really great sponsor, Tim at Audiotistics, who spends a lot of time between Apple Valley and Barstow. And he's been kind of asking me, how do we target Apple Valley? It's bad. And I never spent any time down there, just a little bit. I didn't know. And so did the pre-run and kind of went and looked and talked to him. The cool thing was we kind of we worked together on this, right? And so I said, hey, my first initial thought is I don't want to drop dumpsters down there because I have to have somebody at the dumpsters full time typically. And so from Friday to Monday, like it just doesn't work with my staff or anything else. So what we can do is I'll incentivize some people to head down to Apple Valley, like 10 people or so. They'll pick up trash and bring it back to Barstow. Excuse me. He ran with that because he knows where all the trash is. He showed us. He started promoting to local people in Apple Valley. They ended up bringing 2 more dumpsters and a dump truck out and heavy equipment because again, he's in Apple Valley. He has a stereo shop that does, they're pretty big. He has a lot of connections and friends. So just him promoting brought us 3 dumpsters. And I don't know how many people are down there. I heard 30, 40 people, but they filled those all in the same day. So really, because of what we were doing and working with him, we did 14 dumpsters that day, which is the most we've ever done.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's like, how do you continue on that trajectory? Like, get more off-road related businesses to try to do what Tim did.
Truthfully, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think, the one thing is I'm learning every single time we do an event. I try something new. We learn a little bit from it and kind of expand upon it. I look at what we did with Tim, and almost look at like, do we do 2 events in one day in the future? Like he manages one, or people down in Apple Valley manage one, or maybe that just turns into its own event moving forward. Because I think what he needed all along is a date, and then needed some sort of backing, which would be, Clean Dezert, to say, hey, we'll at least send some people down there. We'll get it started. And then he kind of ran with it and took off, right? And so as much as, I'm going to say we picked up the trash, it was really Tim and Audiotistics, right? They did it. And so I think, even that is kind of the growth of maybe a new event, truthfully. And I probably need to get back on the horn with him. I've talked to him a couple times since, but what does he want to do with it? Because we were down there, like they made maybe a small dent, but there's a lot of stuff. It's really bad. But I think he could start to turn that into his own event. I think he just needed the push of like, how do we get it going? Now he sees how easy it is.
So we were around the fire at the cleanup talking with, I don't remember the gentleman's name, part of the Point Magoo 4-wheel drive.
Oh, I love those guys.
So he was talking about how they do the coastal cleanups, like I don't know if that's the name of it or whatever, but it's one day a year they will clean up the beaches.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, what about Clean Dezert does a Clean Dezert Day or whatever the hell you want to call it, and you have different organizations that are kind of doing what Tim did, but all over.
I think cool. It's something to look at. I think it's worthwhile. Like, I kind of look at all this too as like, the deserts are small, but they're vast, right? And like, then you look at like stuff like Surfrider Foundation, right? Like when I was in high school, believe it or not, I'm a lot skinnier, but we used to surf and spend a lot of time at the beach.
You surfed?
Yeah, a little
big
bit.
Surf guy.
Yeah, back in high school. That was many moons ago. We used to ride a horse to school, but like now that corporation's huge, right? And so I always like, not that that's my target by any means, because this is just a have fun. I do it on the side. I have a normal job like anybody else, but do you use that as a target of like, hey, there is growth opportunities in all this? And what I'm finding and learning a lot too is there's so many organizations doing different things, and like we're very much boots on the ground, right? We're cleaning up trash, making it a tangible impact. That social media is huge. There's a lot of companies, a lot of nonprofits in off-road that are fighting political battles. And I'll tell you, I'm the first person that does not want to do that. I would be the first person yelling at somebody and screaming at them because some illogical thought of why they did something, in a meeting. And I don't want to be that person. Yeah. So I think a lot of this too is just finding out where you fit and what you want to do. I just came back last night from a fundraiser with the Friends of Oceano Dunes. They had this killer fundraiser last night generating money for their legal battle in Pismo. And that's just as important, if not more important, than what I'm doing. The exposure, I think, is a little bit different sometimes, because to me, the political side of it's a little stuffy. I don't want to be there. But it's really neat to see like what the Point Magoo guys are, because most of all of them are part of Friends of Oceano Dunes, but like the impact that they're making on a completely different spectrum. And so it's not always like, you don't always have to be just cleaning up trash, but find out what you can do in the off-road. And if you're more inclined to do like political side of stuff, get involved with those companies because they're doing great things as well.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think the bottom line is do something rather than just sit and bitch about it, because that's what most of the internet seems to be doing.
And I mean, to be fair, like I've done it too, right? Like I'm not different than anybody else. Like I've bitched and moaned enough to the point I said like, okay, we got to do something, like, because nobody's listening, right?
Sure. I mean, I think about like, okay, the Barstow cleanups. We're doing these cleanups. You're doing these cleanups. I'm just, participating. But every year, I can almost guarantee next year, cleanup 12 dumpsters in 4 or 5 hours will be full in the same area.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what's the fix? Like we've already kind of talked about it a little bit. It's tough because it's not, we us off-roaders aren't the ones dumping the trash.
Certainly.
So does it come from the city? But what are they going to do?
And I think that's the one thing that like I've heard for years is like, what's the BLM going to do? It's their land to manage, right? Again, talking to them, they're understaffed.
Yeah.
And he told me what the patrols were out of that Barstow office, and their region is so big that it would blow your mind, right? And the amount of staff like that they have is so little, and they're understaffed, underpaid. Like they're not going to do it. And again, that's our government. Like, it's up to them. That's nothing I can fix at the end of the day. I don't know for Barstow. Like sometimes I get disillusioned of like, we just filled 11 dumpsters in Barstow. Like
there was just a cleanup that happened a couple weeks prior. I don't know how many dumpsters they filled. But
I heard they filled like maybe 2 or 3, but they weren't completely full. But same thing, right? Is like, how do they have a cleanup? And that was always my fear of like, because there was this issue with a cleanup starting like a month or two before ours, is there going to be trash?
Yeah.
I never asked that question again because we show every single year.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think we talked about this around the campfire though. Is the trash now becoming harder to find? Are our staff spreading out farther? Or I should say our volunteers, are they spreading out farther now to get the same amount of trash?
They must have been, because when we did our pre-run, I was like, shit, this is the cleanest I've ever seen this desert, which is a good thing. I mean, that's rad, but
how scary is that though? Going into it, not knowing.
And another thing I just kind of thought about is like, okay, you've got all of these, there's not that many race organizations, but how are the race organizations not jumping on board with keeping their racing areas clean? I mean, is that something you've reached out to those guys on?
I have. So early on, way back in the day, we worked with more back in the day, and we didn't. I think it's very hard, right? And so this is where it probably goes back to me saying that we're boots on the ground. I stay in that lane. Like that's what I've been able to generate and do decent at. And so that's where I want to stay. Race organizations, they're putting on races, right? And so to ask them to now do something completely different, I think is very difficult. More back in the day, help tried to promote, like we'd do a cleanup after the race on Sunday. We'd have a dumpster out there. But let's be honest, all those people just spent all day Saturday racing. They want to get home. And so it wasn't a great success by any means, because when we did it, I can remember 2 or 3 teams that actually stayed, but for the most part, people weren't willing to.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know what the resolve is for that. I know the California 300, they put on an event. I think their heart's in the right direction with wanting to do something. I think that they also do it as part of like good gestures, so they can get a little bit of leeway with BLM, probably, which isn't a bad thing. But I don't know. Again, I don't expect them to do a whole lot of that because they're race promoters, right? Their focus is 95% on the race and 5% on a cleanup. Just like my focus is 95% on the cleanup and 5% on cooking at this point, right? I don't want to have that because that's not my focus.
Totally. But I was thinking about at the cleanup, I was talking with AJ about his race. I don't know, I can't remember the team he's racing with, but he was saying that for the race, he was like, yeah, we're doing pretty well in points, whatever. He's like, we worked a road crossing because they need volunteers, so they will give extra points to. Oh. So I was like, I was thinking about this. Yeah. I was like, hey, check this out. You show up to name the cleanup,
Yeah.
And your team, obviously the whole team isn't going to be able to come out, but if you could send a person or two, you're going to get, I don't know what the points situation is, but there's an incentive there.
There is. I think that's a tricky thing. And like, I'm not a very smart person to figure out that type of stuff. Right. Like when I hear that, I'm like, man, why have I never thought of that?
Yeah.
I think that is the thing, is like trying to figure out how to incentivize people and how to do stuff differently, and target who you're looking at and then figure out the solution for it. I think it's completely plausible. But again, I don't know the resolve. Like, you go back to your original question, is how do we stop the people in the city from doing it? Right.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I can already, somebody that races is like, well, that's not our trash. There's not a bunch of 40s out there. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
But to your point earlier, if that desert closes, you're not racing there.
then
So that's
Congratulations, you have $100,000 race car that you can't race.
yeah. And there was a post on the forum that it was in that cleanup thread, and I think I made the post about it, but it's like, we're whining about the desert being, dirty, whatever, people dumping. Downtown LA, name the major city. You pull up Google Maps, there's trash everywhere, and it's like, it's a little more, if they don't care about it in the cities,
Yeah, they definitely
don't care about it out in the middle of the desert.
What's interesting though, I brought up earlier about how in 2019, like, this green movement. So I got a call 2020, 2021 from the people that put on the Dakar, and they're like, hey, how do you motivate people? Because we have the same thing we want to, but the issues that they're having that I never thought about down in Mexico and out in Dakar, they don't have this whole like green, people want environment, anything. And they're basically I was asking them all these questions. They're like, we couldn't get anybody to come out there and clean even if we paid them, they wouldn't want to do it because they don't see the incentive of like clean anything. So I think we do have that benefit, and it's education. But I think ultimately it's, it sounds bad, but we are, for Clean Desert at least, all the stuff we raffle off, all the stuff we give away for free, that is buying us volunteers, right? And so my response to the people at the car is like, what's the opportunity for Joe Schmo public person out there to ride in one of those vehicles? I go, I bet you if you raffle that off, you get people out there.
Yeah, there's got to be an incentive.
Help. Yeah. And so I think, like, to your point is, what's the incentive to get people there? If you can figure out what that incentive is, then you're going to figure out a solution to getting people.
And I mean, I think like I think I've said this like 8 times during this podcast. It's like, okay, the trash isn't coming from off-roaders, but if we can get, you listeners to, you go out on a trail run or you're out in the desert, whatever, and you pick up cans, somebody sees you doing that. And like you said, hey, do you have another trash bag? People are going to want to help. And it's like, if we can grow this audience that's aware of, hey, we need to clean this up, that's going to spread. And, if this, let's say one person from this podcast is like, you know what, I'm going to do a cleanup. That's one dumpster, one truck bed that's better than it was. And I think that just needs to continue. And I think that's the answer, at least as far as Badlands, and
yeah, we're never going to solve any of it. But like you said, one group of people to start one event or one cleanup, we just did something great with only an hour of our discussion.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, that's the way I look at it, is like, all this Clean Desert stuff that we give out, event shirts, stickers, and we try to promote all this stuff. It's really, we have 400 people at our cleanups, but if we had another 400 that just thought about it outside, then we're winning. Right. And so like, that's a big thing, is if you noticed our cleanups now, 2006 to 2010, it was just us kids, right? We were all in our 20s at that time. Now I'm promoting very heavily the family aspect, which may drive away some people, but like the younger kids that are just wanting to party at night, they can go do that, and that's fine. I have no problem with it. But I want more kids at our event, because now that I'm a father and I have a kid, the next thought is, if we teach them all young, right? The 40, 50, there's probably, I'm willing to bet we probably had 60, 70 kids at our last event, right? Because we gave out all those toys. If all those kids grow up learning to do this, then they're going to be the next people putting on events, but they're also going to be telling their friends. And so, one of the big things that I think about is I never started going to the desert till I was about 18, 19, right? My parents never took me there. We didn't work on cars. They knew nothing about anything. And so I learned everything that I do through my friends. And so I don't want to be a hypocrite. There's times where I've thrown cans on the ground, right? There's times where like I wasn't as clean as I should be. And I'm hoping everything that I'm doing now makes up for that. But it's what you learn. And so now to me, it's very big to teach the kids because maybe their parents, didn't think about teaching them or they weren't desert people. And so the more people we can get out there in the younger generations, I think that's only going to help the future of what we're doing.
I 100% agree. And that's, my kids are, they'll see trash on the side like, oh, that shouldn't be there. We should pick it up. And it's like most kids probably don't even think about that.
I take my daughter for a walk around the neighborhood and she does the same thing. Like she'll see beer cans and like, Dad, we need to pick those up. And I was like, yeah, you're right. We do.
Yeah.
And then the first question is, Dad, why would they do that? And it's like, they just need education. They weren't thinking.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Well, next, any next event that you got? I mean, probably not. You probably don't even have it sorted yet. We're pretty fresh off the
I was
last
gonna
one.
say, hey, bud, it's only been a week. I'm still trying to like recoup from last weekend.
Sure, you and me both.
I don't know what 2025 is gonna entail yet. I want to make some changes to the way that we're kind of handling some stuff. I want to make sure that we're making the correct impact. I will tell you, like, with all this, like last year we put on, was it last year? Yeah, last year we did 2 big events, and then we went to a ton of other stuff, and I burnt out my team. Like I can feel it. Like they're all a little bit burnt out and overasked because nobody's getting paid for anything. We're just doing it out of our free time. And it costs us money, gas to go places and all this stuff. So I'm trying to like refocus on like what's the most important impact for what we do, and where those are. And I want to spend a little bit more time this year trying to have some fun while making impacts and trying to help other people, I think. And so I think that's a big thing is if people need help wanting to start an event or something, let me know. I'd love to get involved, with education and trying to steer people in the right direction. But I get asked a lot, like, are we going to be in Ocotillo? Are you going to do Hodge? Can you come out to Johnson Valley? Can you do Barstow? And again, like each of those are 4 to 5 months, depending on what we're doing with cleanups. And I don't have that much time. And like between working a real job and a family and everything else, like it turns into a lot. And so I want to focus on some big ones and just working at, where we're best suited instead of spinning our wheels on a bunch of stuff that, not that it doesn't help us, but I need to be cognizant of my staff. Again, they're just friends that follow along because I've asked them to. And so where those necessities are.
You got to make sure that it's still enjoyable and that, nobody's burning out. Cause then, that's not that, I mean, obviously your efforts is not solely on fun. It's obviously got a positive, message that you're trying to, I don't want to say portray, but you guys are trying to get the trash cleaned up and get the message out. But if it's not fun, it becomes work.
It becomes work. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing with any of this stuff is like, I don't want it to be work. I want it to be fun with all my friends. And, to have all these volunteers show up and get to talk to a lot of friends that I don't see often. Like, to me, that's fun. Like, that's the coolest thing ever is, and like, I would even venture to say, I've known, we've been around the same sport for years, right? And we've talked for years, but having you guys come on and when you started your own website and stuff and like help promote Clean Dezert, like the friendship became so much bigger than what it ever was. And so like, that's one of the cool things that comes out of doing all this is just the amount of really nice people you get to meet that are, in the same sector, want to do the same stuff. And so there's a lot of benefit to what we do just behind, not only picking up trash, but just the positives.
100%. All that, like we always talk about the like-minded people, and you go out to the cleanup and, I would say 95% of the people, you needed something, you whatever. If you need the shirt, here, take it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of folks that are going out there to that.
Yeah, they're all great people, and I think every year I get new people that come out and come talk to me and like, oh my God, this is great, and everyone here's so nice. Or you have people that are very timid, wanting to come out to the event because I don't know anyone, and I'm willing to bet if you pulled 10 to 20 people aside at the event and say, hey, like, when you first started coming to these, did you know people here? I'm willing to bet most of them said like, no,
Yeah.
I didn't know people.
No, exactly. And it's like you pull up, like somebody backs into the dumpster with a bed full of trash. You're getting a bunch of people that are helping you unload it.
Yeah.
That's just,
Yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Because everyone's there for the same common goal, which is great.
yeah. But right on. Well, so Clean Desert, follow them on Instagram, websites, cleandesert.org. They're a supporter of our forum. You can give Adam a bad time in his direct messages. And cheers. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for the support, bud.